Like many older gamers, I have a love-love, hate-love relationship with the Final Fantasy universe. For every game that offered an escape to a magical world, there's a cringe-worthy direct-to-video movie, or an abominated reboot, or an unnecessary sequel to counter it. But no matter how many bad entries there have been, nothing can knock loose the lasting positive memories of the first time I witnessed Terra's march across the snow in her Magitech armor, or the opening bombing mission in Final Fantasy VII, or the absolutely perfect soundtrack to Final Fantasy IX. I will always remain hopeful and keep an open mind about Final Fantasy, no matter how many Final Fantasy XIIIs the series throws at me. Recently, Square released World of Final Fantasy, a non-numbered entry with a unique mixture of visuals, including chibi and manga styles, and gameplay that's familiar to Final Fantasy fans using turn-based battles, but also reminiscent to Pokemon fans as players scramble to collect as many classic Final Fantasy monsters as possible. This approach was meant to attract a new, younger audience to the series, and considering my 4-year-old son wanted to sit on my lap every opportunity he could to watch me play so he could see the Moogles and dragons and assorted creatures use their powers on one another, I think the tactic worked. But since the game also loosely stitches together characters and locations from most of the numbered Final Fantasy games, I found myself glued through the journey. World of Final Fantasy is a delightful, lighthearted reminder of just about everything I've come to love with Final Fantasy. Players join Rain and Lan, amnesiac twins who awaken in an abandoned town frozen in time. They're pushed out the door into another dimension to recover their memory, find their family, and save the world of Grimoire by capturing and training as many monsters, called Mirages, as possible, using the wonky magical gauntlet design dailies on their arms. They are joined by Tama, a fox-like Mirage who occasionally chips in with insightful information. The story starts out super slowly, to the point where it almost lost me. It does not have the same punchy introduction as many classic Final Fantasies that has the player learn about the game while playing it. World of Final Fantasy spends too much time talking and explaining instead of showing. After the game chokes on its own introduction, it finds a good flow for itself. I couldn't stop myself from playing, as it whisked me from one beautiful and memorable set piece to the next. The story is super simple, even cliché at first. There's no political intrigue, no characters with questionable motives. In the beginning, everything is plain, and I found it to be a pleasant and pure escapist trip. But about 3/4 of the way through, it becomes much more complex, with a lovely story twist to reward players who've held on for the duration. The game is solidly built. I didn't find the textures or the models to be out of place. Similar to a well-refined Nintendo game, Square knew its hardware limitations and built a stylish game with plenty of wiggle room to keep performance up. It is proof positive that you don't need cutting-edge graphics in every single new release to make a lasting, enjoyable, and memorable game.
You're done!
It's not afraid to show its roots in the Final Fantasy universe, or in its Pokemon gameplay, complete with opening battle against a Pikachu-esque Mirage. Collecting monsters and leveling them up appeals to the completionist in me, and I also enjoyed the level of customization it granted me on a scenario-to-scenario basis. Similar to past Final Fantasy games, players can summon spiritual warriors to fight by their side. But instead of raising Bahamut, Shiva, Ifrit, and others, who still make playable appearances in the game, players call upon characters from older Final Fantasy games like Cloud, Celeste, Lightning, or Squall in a hybrid game mechanic of traditional summoning and limit breaks. There's no way this entry can be considered canon for these characters, but it's fun to mix them up and see what happens. Each of these characters has their own little story within the grand scheme of World of Final Fantasy, and are fully voiced. I was ready to cringe at the voices chosen for some of my favorites from the 8, 16, and 32-bit eras, but I was pleasantly surprised by all their performances. World of Final Fantasy is very self-aware, occasionally cracking jokes at its own expense.
Oh, loving this weather.
It makes me just want to laugh out loud.
I have no idea how to react to that, so I'm just gonna ignore you. Now, what do you say we head for that town over there?
Classic sets and music tracks are revisited in a remixed fashion. I could feel nostalgic goosebumps while listening to the Mako reactor theme. I felt at home seeing Figaro Castle rise from the sands. But it's not just one huge trip down memory lane. A lot of the original tracks are just as beautiful. I wholeheartedly look forward to getting a copy of the soundtrack if it ever becomes available for purchase outside of the collector's edition. While I think almost everyone's performances were good, the character direction for everyone was not. Sadly, my two least favorite characters in the entire game are two major ones, Tama and Lon. Rain, the sister, plays the straight character, and one of the two main protagonists. I'd say she has the most important role. She's devoted, caring, a natural leader, and intelligent. Her thoughts and dialogue are often expository and continue to push the story forward. As the straight character, when she's angry or cracking jokes or being silly or scared, it feels genuine because it's a break from her standard neutral demeanor. Lon, the brother, who I was originally surprised to find out is not actually Cloud, is more of a traveling comic relief. But unlike proper comic relief, Lon's character and character direction don't understand the meaning of timing. Lon is almost always cracking jokes, or being silly, or intentionally obtuse, and I'd say that about 10% of his jokes are funny, which means he's 90% annoying. And then there's Tama, who also acts as comic relief, most of the time more successfully than Lon. Tama's largest offense, to me, aside from looking like someone barfed glitter and bows on a stuffed animal, is her manner of speech. She, like Jar Jar Binks before her, adds a redundant word set in her patois.
That's the right! I have the power to rewind time a little, and then to whisk you to safety. Although, it costs me a life to do it, so I hope you don't mind if I rest for a little the while afterwards.
A life?
You might not believe it, but I've actually got multiple lives. Back there, I had to sacrifice one of those lives to turn back time and to save you.
The. Random words have the before them. At first I thought it was sort of cute, but after 5 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I thought the solution would be to run the Japanese voices instead of the English ones, but apparently that doesn't come as a standard option for the core game. And turning off the voices altogether makes the overly dramatic arm motions seem weird during cutscenes. So I sucked it up and dealt with the thes for the duration, which came to about 60 hours. Players could probably finish the game faster. 60 hours included a lot of elective grinding on my part, and time spent fighting in the Colosseum, and I'm not even sure how much of that 60 hours was me leaving the game artificially paused in a menu screen to help out my kids with something around the house. You can also spend more than 60 hours. After the final credits, new dungeons are unlocked and new stacking options become available to the player. But considering the style and the simple nature of World of Final Fantasy, I thought everything would wrap up around the 20-hour mark, and I was surprised by how much value you get for your money here. Though the stacking system is unique and provides some interesting gameplay ideas, the visual presentation of it seems super strange to me. 3 creatures all on top of one another like high school cheerleading practice. It just looks visually awkward. Instead of stacked or unstacked, why not in and out of formation? It would look way more natural, and I can't believe I'm saying this about a game with magic and dragons and Moogles, but it would make more sense too. Small characters could still ride on super large ones, like the Magitech armor and dragons, but stacking them vertically totem style is just like watching the Ginyu Force do their dance over and over again. Is it so stupid it's awesome, or just stupid? Another tiny gripe I have is with the UI. For the most part, the UI is great. It's minimalistic, stays out of the way, but the combat interface comes in 2 modes. Simple, which simply doesn't have enough options to be effective when fighting tougher bosses, and Classic, which doesn't show the refill meter to summon your heroes. You can swap between the two on the fly with a push of a button, but it seems a better, more intuitive UI could have been done as a combination of both. Also, the spells are listed by stack order, and are not automatically sorted based on function, which makes sifting through your most used spells a bit awkward when you swap frequently between mirages in your formations. Finally, there's a few minigames that are simply terrible and feel awkwardly tacked on in the final portion of the game. After they're unlocked, you have the option to play them whenever you want from the twins' bedroom, but I assure you, I never ever want to play those games ever again. Instead of those minigames, I would have appreciated it much more if you could play the original Final Fantasy or some other classic title on their console.
It's huge!
Snow, which part of this thing is the butt?
Oh, it's all butt!
But considering all the criticisms I have for World of Final Fantasy, I had a wonderful time playing it, and wholeheartedly recommend it to fans of Final Fantasy, Pokemon, or anyone who's curious about the series in general. It's a good stepping on point for sure. It's not too hard to learn, but there's plenty of genuine challenge to be had. The music is great, the environments are beautiful. This will be a sleeper hit for the franchise for sure, and it keeps me hopeful for what else Square has in store for the future.